Spencer Tracy, one of Hollywood's greatest actors, was known for his powerful performances and complex personal life. When he passed away in 1967, his final burial request reflected his deep love for actress Katharine Hepburn, a relationship that had lasted over 25 years, despite him being married to another woman. Tracy wished for a quiet, private farewell with no grand Hollywood funeral. As per his wishes, there was no official memorial service, and his body was laid to rest in Forest Lawn Memorial Park, far from the glitz and glamour of Hollywood. But the strangest part, Katharine Hepburn, his lifelong love, never attended his funeral. She later revealed that she stayed away out of respect for Tracy's wife, Louise, who had remained legally married to him until his death. Hepburn visited Tracy's grave in private, honoring his memory in her own way. His desire for a low-key farewell, without the presence of the woman he loved most, adds an eerie and heartbreaking twist to his Hollywood legacy. Even in death, Tracy remained a man of mystery, bound by love, secrecy, and an unusual request that left many questioning the true nature of his final days. Bette Davis, the fiery and fearless queen of Hollywood's golden age, lived life on her own terms, and she planned to leave the world the same way. When she passed away in 1989, she made sure her final burial reflected her legendary persona. Instead of a traditional, somber epitaph, Davis requested a tombstone inscription that was as sharp and defiant as the roles she played. Engraved on her gravestone were the words, "She did it the hard way." This was no ordinary farewell. Davis had spent her entire career fighting against the Hollywood system, breaking barriers for actresses, and refusing to be controlled by studio executives. Her final message was a direct nod to her lifelong struggles and triumphs. Buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Los Angeles, she ensured that even in death, she would have the last word. But the eerie part? Just weeks before her passing, Davis had traveled to Spain for a film festival despite her deteriorating health. Many believe she knew the end was near and was determined to have one final adventure before saying goodbye. Her burial request wasn't just a statement, it was a challenge to Hollywood and the world, proving that Bette Davis never backed down. John Barrymore, the charismatic and hard-drinking Hollywood legend, lived a life full of drama, excess, and unforgettable performances. But even in death, he left behind one of the most bizarre burial stories in Hollywood history. When Barrymore passed away in 1942, his final resting place was supposed to be in Calvary Cemetery in Los Angeles. However, his body didn't go straight to the grave. Instead, his closest friends, actors Errol Flynn, W.C. Fields, and director Raoul Walsh, allegedly borrowed his corpse for one last wild night. According to Hollywood legend, Walsh had Barrymore's body taken to Flynn's house and propped up in a chair as a macabre prank. When Flynn arrived home, he was horrified to see his deceased friend sitting there, as if waiting for one final drink. Though some claim this story was exaggerated, Walsh himself admitted in interviews that something unusual did happen with Barrymore's body before burial. Even stranger, Barrymore's remains were later moved to Philadelphia's Mount Vernon Cemetery, far from Hollywood. Whether the prank actually happened or not, the legend of John Barrymore's unusual final request lives on, proving that his presence, dead or alive, was impossible to ignore. Cary Grant, the epitome of Hollywood charm and sophistication, had a life filled with glamour, elegance, and timeless performances. But when he passed away in 1986, his final burial request was shockingly simple. He wanted no traditional grave, no grand mausoleum, and no Hollywood spectacle. Instead, he chose to be cremated, with his ashes scattered in an undisclosed location. Grant had spent decades crafting an image of effortless perfection, but behind the scenes, he was a deeply private man. His decision to forego a public burial reflected his desire to maintain that mystery, even in death. Unlike many Golden Age stars who had elaborate funeral arrangements, Grant rejected all formalities. There was no large public service, no Hollywood Boulevard tribute, just a quiet farewell, exactly as he wished. What makes this request even stranger is that, despite his worldwide fame, there is no official marker or gravesite for fans to visit. His ashes were reportedly scattered somewhere special, but to this day no one knows where. Some say it was over the Pacific Ocean, while others believe it was in his favorite English countryside. One thing is certain, Cary Grant's final request ensured that, just like in life, he remained an enigma. Buster Keaton, the silent film genius known for his deadpan expression and daring stunts, spent his life making audiences laugh. But when he passed away in 1966, his final burial request was surprisingly simple. He wanted no grand funeral, no Hollywood spectacle, just a quiet goodbye. However, there's a strange twist to his story. Keaton, who had cheated death countless times in his films, was diagnosed with lung cancer in late 1965. Unaware of how serious his condition was, he continued living life as usual, even playing cards with friends in his final days. When he passed, his wife, Eleanor, honored his wishes by keeping things private. He was buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Hollywood Hills with a small, intimate service. But the eerie part? Keaton, a man famous for surviving insane stunts, reportedly spent his final days believing he was on a film set, giving instructions, preparing for his next scene. Some say it was a poetic ending, as he left this world the same way he had lived, immersed in the magic of movies. Even in death, Buster Keaton remained true to his greatest role, the man who never flinched, even in the face of the inevitable. Rita Hayworth, the ultimate Hollywood bombshell and the love goddess of the 1940s, captivated audiences with her beauty and grace. But her final years were far from glamorous. Suffering from Alzheimer's disease, long before it was widely understood, Hayworth's last years were filled with confusion and isolation. When she passed away in 1987, her final burial request reflected both her tragic decline and her family's deep love for her. Unlike many Golden Age stars buried in Hollywood cemeteries, Hayworth was laid to rest in Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City, far from the limelight. Her daughter, Princess Yasmin Aga Khan, made sure her mother's grave was simple yet elegant, honoring the woman behind the screen legend. The real heartbreak? In life, Hayworth had once been Hollywood's most desired woman, but in her final years, she was forgotten by many. Her funeral, however, was attended by Hollywood royalty, including Glenn Ford, who had loved her deeply throughout his life. Hayworth's grave remains a quiet, dignified place, far from the flashing cameras she once dominated. In the end, her most unusual request wasn't about glamour, but about finding peace after years of struggle. A tragic, yet fitting, ending for a woman who lived in the shadow of her own legend. Ingrid Bergman, the luminous star of Casablanca and one of Hollywood's most celebrated actresses, had a life filled with triumphs, scandals, and reinvention. But when she passed away on her 67th birthday in 1982, her final burial request was both simple and deeply personal. She wanted to be laid to rest in Sweden, far from the glitz of Hollywood. Despite her legendary status in American cinema, Bergman never forgot her Scandinavian roots. She requested that her ashes be scattered in the sea off the coast of Sweden, the country where she was born. However, a portion of her remains was also buried next to her parents in Stockholm's Norra Begravningsplatsen cemetery. This dual resting place reflected her divided life, between Hollywood, Europe, and the personal struggles she endured. What makes her request even stranger is that, despite being one of the most famous actresses of all time, there is no grand Hollywood memorial for her. She chose to be remembered not as a movie star, but as a daughter of Sweden. Even in death, Ingrid Bergman remained true to herself, graceful, independent, and unwilling to let Hollywood define her final chapter. Marlene Dietrich, the enigmatic and glamorous German-American actress, lived a life of mystery, rebellion, and undeniable star power. But when she passed away in 1992 at the age of 90, her final burial request was both symbolic and melancholic. She wanted to return to Berlin, the city she had once abandoned. Dietrich had spent decades in self-imposed exile, refusing to return to Germany after openly opposing the Nazi regime during World War II. However, in a surprising twist, she requested to be buried in her homeland. Her remains were flown from Paris, where she had lived in seclusion for years, and laid to rest in Stadtischer Friedhof 3 in Berlin, next to her mother. Her simple gravestone bore only her name and the years of her life, nothing else. The strangest part? Despite her immense fame, only a small group of people attended her funeral. Berlin had once shunned her, calling her a traitor, and in death, the city seemed indifferent. Yet, her grave has since become a pilgrimage site, proving that, even in death, Dietrich remained a woman of contradictions, forever caught between fame, exile, and the home she could never truly leave behind. James Cagney, the tough-talking gangster of Hollywood's golden age, was famous for his electrifying performances in films like The Public Enemy and White Heat. But despite his larger-than-life persona, his final burial request was shockingly modest. When he passed away in 1986 at the age of 86, Cagney chose to be buried in a quiet, rural cemetery, far from the Hollywood spotlight. Instead of resting among the stars in Los Angeles, Cagney was laid to rest at Gate of Heaven Cemetery in New York, near his beloved 800-acre farm in Stanfordville. Unlike many actors who sought grand memorials, Cagney's request was simple. No extravagant funeral, no public spectacle, just a peaceful resting place in the countryside he loved. But the most unusual part? Cagney, once the ultimate on-screen gangster, had spent his later years painting landscapes and embracing a quiet, reclusive life. His burial reflected that transformation, as he distanced himself from the industry that had made him famous. Even in death, he remained a rebel in his own way, proving that the toughest guy in Hollywood had a softer side, one that wanted nothing more than a quiet farewell on his own terms. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment. Also, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell to be notified of our new videos each day. Thanks for watching.